Hello and welcome to this week's Scriptcase video. So just before the holidays, we are here to show you one of the latest new features, and that is the addition of Stripe payments via the API within Scriptcase. So this is actually going to be quite a simple project to put together as long as we follow a few very important steps. So once I'm logged in, I can go ahead and create a new project or use an existing template or project, or of course import one, or however I please. Now, as you will be importing this project, I'm going to go ahead and use the original project which I received. Okay, and within that I have already gone ahead and created one or two applications, testing it out, seeing how it works, and with that then you will have then the original project as well as the project which I have created, as well as the project from this video / webinar that will be live tomorrow. Okay, so as you see, I already have one here for Pay Stripe. I'm just going to use here the payments example, which is the original project that I received, and within this I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder. Okay, so I'm just going to call this Stripe and click create. Okay, so now the project database, which typically is very important with Scriptcase because of course our applications are based on a database, in this case won't really matter. I'm using the samples database, but for today's example I will be creating one new application, and that will be a control form. Okay, and here I'll call this control_pay Stripe. Okay, and then I'll just click create. Now the localization is in Portuguese. Now I will go ahead and change that in a few moments, so then you also see how you can change then the language of the applications, as well as some of the typical features that or options that you may want to change when you import a project that is not yours. So one of the first things would typically be the database, which we can find up here. And if I go ahead and click on edit connection, I can then already go ahead and edit the database to which I'm connected to. And you see here, I'm using the original database that Raphael used here. I don't have this, so I'm going to go ahead and just close this. And if I go ahead and run the application, it will give an error message now because of course I have created a control application, meaning that I also need to add my fields. Okay, so I have not added any fields yet. So for that reason, it will actually generate me an error message now. But just to show that in general that the database in this case, specific case, is not as important. Now you will be able to take this project and import it into the Scriptcase and use these applications. So you will be able to import this, or copy, should I say. You will be able to copy this specific application into your own project, change the database for the application, and then from there you can then also go ahead and use this application directly or make the changes and so forth. So now that I've created my control form, and just as I mentioned, I had received the error message, form fields undefined, because I have not created any yet. So I'm going to start by creating a new field, and I will create 10 new fields. Okay. In fact, let me restart that. I'm going to create 9 new fields. I think we just need 9. Okay, so I'm just going to create 9 new fields. And here I'm going to start off with the amount that will be paid. So, of course, there will be a specific currency amount that will be paid. So here I will specify the amount. And then for the next field, I'd call that card name. And I'm going to give the name a capital letter. Okay, so here, name on card. And then the next field I want is then the card number. Number on card. And then I also want to have the card date, because there is a date on the card. Date on card. And there is then also the CVC code. So I'll just call this card code. Okay. And there I can just say CVC. And we then also want to have a flag field, a payment information field, payment info, a token field, and finally also an image field. And I'll call that image underscore card. Okay, so if I go ahead and click create now, it will basically create all these fields. But before I do so, I'm going to customize here the type of fields that they are. So here for the pay info, I want this one to be a label field. So I can specify that here now. And then for the image card, I want that also to be a label field. Okay, so if I then go ahead and click on create, it will then go ahead and create those fields for me. So there I have now my image card and all of these fields. So if I go ahead and run now the control application, I now have the fields that I have for this. So let's make some basic customizations to this first of all, so that it starts to look nice straight away. So I'm going to specify here vertical alignment to the top. And if I run that, then you'll see what that then does. It will then place the form straight at the top. Really nice like that. Of course, you may want to have the payment here in the middle or anywhere else, and you can very quickly make those adjustments by choosing here top, center, bottom, and then adjusting here the margins if you want to. Now, I will also want my inputs at 100%, and I also want to specify a size for this page. So I'm going to say 80%. So here I'm specifying the unit and then also the width. So here 80 and then here from the drop down percent. Now if I go ahead and run that, it will then adjust the form to those dimensions and provide our fields here as 100% width. Okay, so because it's a payment form, I don't really want an OK, an exit button here. And of course, I want to also make those adjustments to the language and so forth. So skipping here the fields for the time being, we will come back to these in a few moments, but for now, let's come down here to application and come here then also to settings. And then here within settings, I can change here the language of this specific application. And I want it to be in English. Okay, so just like that, it would then change the language. And if I run that now, then any error messages and titles and so forth will be then generated if using language keys with the English language. Okay, so then I can also make further adjustments here if I wanted to. For instance, enable debug mode, which we may need to do later on or not. And of course, other adjustments here for the timeout and other settings, which are all very good. Okay, so let's carry on. So we then also, let's have a quick look at our form here. So we have then here our fields that we've added. We have it in English. We have here the toolbar. So let's jump into that. So here for the toolbar, I can then change here the labels. So here I'll say make payment. And here I will say cancel instead of exit. Okay, and let me adjust those so we position those slightly different. I'll save that and then run that application again. And then just like that, those buttons have now moved to those positions that I just defined. And we have then also the make payment label there. Okay, so I want to change then also the layout of these fields. So I'm going to come here to layout and then here to blocks. And then here within blocks, I'm going to create a new block. And I can give it any name. So I'll just give it block 0 so that I can identify it easy enough. And I know it's block 0. And I could actually adjust that here if I want to, just by dragging it up and down here with the arrows. I can edit the details from that if I wanted to, clicking there on the pen, which I don't need to for now. Okay. And I can then also make further adjustments here on the right-hand side, which is what I'm going to do now. So first of all, I'm going to place the label position to above the field, as in the insert field. And here I want to display the title. So here I'm going to say card details. And then here I'm just going to say card. Or, yeah, let's just leave it as card. And then here for next, I'm going to specify beside, and I'm going to add a 50% width for the two of them and go no here on the collapse. Okay, so if I go ahead and run that now, there'll be no difference. There's a slight difference, but it hasn't aligned anything yet because I have not placed any fields into that new block yet. So I need to do that, and I can do that here within edit fields. I can also do that here within fields positioning, which is in most cases much faster. So here I could just do like so, save that, and then run it, and then that block or that field will then be positioned here on the right hand side. Okay, so I want to place one more field there, so I'm going to come back here to edit fields, and I really like to use this section here, so I'm going to drag and drop here the token, and here the flag. I'm going to place that there also, and I'm going to move the pay info here to the top. And what I might actually do is, if I go ahead and run that now, we have then the label at the top, and we have here then the pay information. And what I sometimes like to do is I sometimes like to add an extra block there. So if I go ahead and create a new block, and that way we have then also the information separate from the rest of it. So I'm going to place that here at the top. I leave that here as 100% and the label above, but I'm not going to display it. Okay, and then I'm going to save that. And then I come back here to edit fields, and then the pay info, I'll place that there into that initial block up there. Okay, so if I save that, and then we have that like so. Okay, so I want to first of all come here to the token field, and the token field is actually going to be a hidden field. So I want to specify hidden here and save that. And then here the flag field, this field, we actually want this to be a label field or disabled. Actually hit disabled. So select disabled here, disabled, and save that. And then if I go ahead and run that again now, we can then we'll have then a disabled field here, which will just display information. Okay. And then the flag field, which we just hidden, we can have that then also for some extra data if you wanted to. So it's just there as an extra really. Okay, so once we've done that, we have then first of all here the events to add. So let's come first of all here to the script init, so events, and then script init. Now I want to add some validation on here for those fields. So if I call here a method, validation, and with that, then I will be creating, well, I need to create the method now first. So I'm calling the method, and then down here, I'm going to now create it. So I can just copy that name, go new method, and then paste that in there, and then click create. Okay. Okay. Already exists a method with this name. Or it doesn't, but it exists in another one. So if I go validation and I go underscore fields, let's go val fields, like so, create. Okay, so it's going to validate. It actually created it there, look. So it's right there. So I'm going to actually delete that val fields, keep there the validation. Okay, so I guess it just clicked through there and it tried to create it twice. But it's here already, so we will use this one. And then within that, we want to add some code in a few moments. But first of all, we have here the onload event. Now, for the onload event, we have this amount field, which we want to add some data to. So let's first of all attach to this field. There we have then the amount field, and that will then equal a payment or payment details that we are going to receive. Remember brackets. Yeah, okay. So that will then be a global variable, and we can basically call that as whatever we want. So I'll call that total payment, like so, and then that will be passed on when we then start the form. So if I go ahead and click run now, it will then request this global variable of total payment, and I can say then $9.99 for instance, and then that is then displayed here for the amount. Now for the amount, you may want to make some adjustments. So for myself, I think really here, we can go ahead and change here the font size to 22, make it bold as well. You may want to add some color in there or anything. And I'm going to add vertical and horizontal alignment in there also. And if I go ahead and run that, it will then just make those adjustments to that payment field. So if I now go $29.99, for instance, it's actually gone here on this field. Did I not? Title on the field. Yeah, on the output object. Okay, so then here. Okay, so sometimes you may find that you just mix yourself up really quickly there, and it's not a problem. What we have to do then is just come back into the application like you see and just correct it really quickly, really easily, and of course then return back to the form to see those adjustments. And then we have that then as 99.99. Now you may want to change this then also to a label field, for instance, because of course the value can then be changed by the end user unless that is something that you wanted. And then, but as a label field note, of course, you see it removes the styling from there. Okay, so maybe not have that as a label field, but of course what you can do, if we come here to event fields and then amount, we can set it as read only here and then run that again. And then this time we have then pretty much the same effect. Okay, so that's optional, and of course whichever way you want to go. So I'm going to leave the field as it is for now, and then of course we can make those adjustments. Now if I do, for instance, make that change so it is read only, then for the field, then that is why then in that case you would want to style here the CSS field. So if I set that here also, and then it would then basically automatically be the same. Okay, so with that we have then also an validation here that we want to apply. So here, first of all, we're going to start off by adding a method here, well, some basic validation, and I'm just going to basically copy and paste that so that I can continue on and try and explain as much as possible. Okay, so here for the onValidate, we're launching here if method. So if it's this method field, okay, which doesn't exist, okay, because this is from the other application, as you'll see later. So if I wanted to actually add a drop-down field here, which was the 10th field that I wanted to add, then we would then basically checking if the method is selected as card. So in that case I had it as pay later, which you will see within the other application. When you go through that, then you will see that there. So for this case, I'm going to go ahead and remove that. It's not needed in this case, and really I just want to add validation to the fields that I have here right away without any intermediate selection there, okay, which is what we had going on previously. Okay, so here for if the field card name is empty, and here if the card number is empty, card date or card code, then it's going to give an error message. So if any of these are empty, then we will see an error message saying, please confirm your card details. Okay, so at least then the card details are then added. Okay, so then we have the onValidate success, but we're going to come to that one in a few moments. First of all, let's check out here our validation that we have here. Okay, so for the validation, it's really just a script, and I'm going to add it in here. And if you do check out the other application, again, you will see extra validation code for the alternative application. In fact, I could just copy paste it in here, and let's just, there you go, there we go. So as you see, it's pretty much again with the method card, because we had a field called method, and then when we change the select on that from card to pay now, for instance, then it would switch all of these card fields off and then only display the information field presenting the option to pay later. So that is one option, because of course with one of the other new APIs, that is a possibility that can be set up, and they are also included here within this application. So if you want to go ahead and check those out, you can do. I will quickly dive into those before we finish up, however. Okay, so this isn't needed, and the code is also available within the other applications. So in this case, really, we are just needing here the card script. Now, to save the validation, I could just remove it from here and place it directly in here, or I'm sorry, on the onLoad event, because onLoad or even on script init, on either of these two, because we can place it on load as well, and I could just place that here instead and remove the validation entirely. Okay, so I think it would be better to have the method there and actually add the script and then add extra code if you wanted to, but for this example that I'm actually creating here, yeah, it's really not needed. Okay, so I'm just going to continue on. So we have our validation here. Okay, for our card fields, which is important, we have on our script init here, the validation's gone. So let me add that again. Okay, so that will add that. And I'm coming back to this, okay, because we're not finished with this one yet. And we have here then our onload event, which is then for the field. So on script init, you may have noticed that I am calling another Scriptcase macro here. So I'm calling here the SCURL library, and we are in fact using a library. So if I come here to Tools and External Libraries, I will come down and scroll all the way down. We have here the card library attached. Now, once you have imported this, you will also more than likely have it, as I do with all of the projects that I've imported. I get then everyone else's. If you scroll up here, you will then also have an option here for the card master stripe. Okay, so you could now basically go ahead and use this library, or in fact save as, and then use the new library, and then that is essentially the same as this one. Okay, so you don't actually have to come into the project to grab hold of the library that we are using. If you want to use it in another project, you can do so without having to access this library and again going through the same process that I did. Okay, so let's have a quick look at this library. If I click here the edit option, I have then within this library first of all the card folder, and then we have another folder in here called Card Master. And if any of you have seen this, then you'll know that this basically flips an emulated card around and displays then the fields when you click on it. So we're going to be adding that in a moment, and of course setting that up. So within this here we have the distribution folder, and then we are calling here the card.js file. Okay, so that is what is added here, and we are then echoing that basically so that it is output as a script with the URL from our library. Okay, so that's basically how you would do that, and I'm just going to go ahead and save that again, and that is then near enough ready. Okay, so one very important factor when we typically add JavaScript or other scripts, external scripts to our applications, we typically need to also start applications. So for that we come here to the JavaScript, and you have all your objects as well as the events here, so do check those out. But in this case I'm just going to go ahead and click View, and there are none attached. So I need to add one. Okay, so I'm going to go back, and then here I'm going to select the object. And I can choose the form, which is what the entire form would be, or I can select individual fields, attaching it basically to a field. So in this case, I want to choose the form, and the event here is on load. So when the form loads, I want to then have an event, and there is already an event there. There's just obviously nothing in it yet because we haven't added anything, hence why it's always pretty much there. Okay, so do check that out in case you missed that, because I actually did miss that when I was actually checking the format initially, because yes, you have to click on the view button. Okay, so that's very important. So here, first of all, I'm going to add the card initiation or initial object, to initialize the object, should I say. And for that, basically you are going to create a new card. Okay, and then that we have then here all of the definitions provided, and do notice that I have here the label field with ID underscore SC underscore field underscore, and then all in lowercase. Okay, so if I go ahead and run this now, and I don't really have to add anything in there, but let's just run it anyway. And if I click on any of these fields, then we want this image here to display. It's not going to run yet. I still have to make a few adjustments there, but any doubts, we can always right click and inspect on the page, and then you can check out what those specific IDs are. So here, for instance, I have the S card name. It's always a lowercase. So even if I add uppercase anywhere in the field name, it will then always be lowercase. Okay, so to edit that, I just have to come here to View again, and then I can select that and click here on Edit. Okay, so let's double check here our fields. We have here, first of all, the card wrapper and the form. So these are then the definitions defined by Scriptcase, of course, and that should then attach that to the control form. And then we have the form selector. So here we have then the form number. So this then attaches that here to the form number, the card date, the card code, and then also the card name. So below that then we have the defined placeholders, which we can then have available for the card. Okay, so that is then displayed on the image of the card. And then we have here the masks also on the image of the card. And at the bottom here, we have then again a function applied for when we change the type of card. So when we add our number, it then changes the type of card. In fact, that adds it then here into our flag field, which we had set as disabled. Okay, so if I go ahead and update that, and then we still have, as you may have noticed, because if I run now, we still have nothing applied. Okay, so let me close here this one, and if I come here to 99.99, again, I have no image applied here. So what I will then do is then I will come here to the field, and that is here the image card. And then in here, I need to add this card wrapper. Okay, so div class card wrapper. I can save that. And now if I go ahead and run that again, we now have the card displayed. And if I click on the name is highlighted, and the number, the date on the card, and I click on the CVC, the image will turn around. Now we still have here the card image, so I can go ahead here for this field, and I can just go ahead and delete that from the label, save that, and run again. Or as I had done previously, I could also just go ahead and change or remove here the labels from the block. So let's just add here the image again, just so that there is some title there, and return back here to the layout blocks. And here for the position of the labels here, we don't want to display them for the card. And if I go ahead and run that again, it will then run our card and the card type down here. Okay, so we have then here also our pay info field. So here we can type in some information. Maybe you want to add a global variable in there to capture product information or anything else. And of course that could then also be displayed to the end user on completion. Okay, so our form is pretty much there. We have all the fields ready. The card object is working beautifully. Now we could change the title here. So let's come here to the layout, header and footer. Remove the, in fact, let's have hit there the title, remove that and make a payment. So have that as the title. And just like that, then we have then also pretty much a complete form there. Now we still need to add our on validation success. So here within our events, we have then our on validate success. And this is of course where we would then call our Stripe API. Now, if you haven't used APIs before, you have them available up here in tools and then API. So if I click on that, I have then here the Stripe API, which has already been added with this project. So I will leave this one here. So this is also then from the previous project, and I will also go ahead and use the same details. Okay, so I do already have my own down here, and I could use that. So I will just have to make those adjustments. Okay, so once you have them saved, and to add a new one, we just click there on the add new. We can choose whether it's a public, project, or user. As you saw, mine is in user, and then we have this one within the project. Okay, and then within the SMTP or the gateway option, we can then choose the gateway or the API which we want to use. So in this case, we want to use the payment API Stripe. So here within payments, we have then all of the payment APIs, PayPal, Braintree, which is also the other new one, Mecca Pago, whatever that's called, and Stripe chat API for WhatsApp. So any APIs we want to use, we just have to select them in here, and then we can add our API keys and any other corresponding details or information which may be required to use that API, such as a username and password, or again, the API key or secret key. So in this case, I would just have to add a name, add the API key, and that would be saved. Okay, so that's how we then add the API, and then with the API then available, I can then call it here within my application. And I do that very easily by calling here or using the macro sc_call_API. And as you see here, I have here my own API that I was using. So I'll just replace that here with the Stripe one that's there for the project, and that will then already work. So we have, of course, a few options to apply here. Now, what's very important is, first of all, is the Stripe documentation. Okay, so you have all of the information to further use the API for other features, such as creating invoices, listing account information, adding customer data, and much more. Okay, so anything you want to do, so you can also create payment links and so forth, and access those here, or the details for those here within the Stripe development page. Okay, so here we also have information, for instance, on the payment methods, and here I can create a payment object, and then here we have then all the information pertaining to that object, or here in this case the payment method. Okay, so in all cases here we have the option to change from PHP to curl. So if you prefer to use curl, you can still use that. It will still work, and of course that is also much easier to use within Scriptcase. Alternatively, with now the API, you just have to choose now the typical PHP option, and you can pretty much replicate some of the details that we have here. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to go ahead again and copy and paste everything I have here. And in this case, the first thing we're doing is taking our date. Okay, so we're having here a date entered by a user, and don't have a date field. Of course, I will want to add some options there. So the date is then there, and we have those fields. So we'll do that in a few moments before we finish up, so that the card or the form is pretty much complete. So this will pretty much be taking that date apart, or exploding it as it says here, and it will be creating a month and year variable, which we are then using here. Okay, and then we have here the card number, the card code for the CVC code, and then here for the response, we create then basically a payment request, or it processes then the payment. So in this case, we are using the currency euro, and you just have to then change any currency that you want to have there. And then we have here also our amount field. Now I have here an automatic redirection set up. So in this case, it's really just a demo. So if I go ahead and save that, if we just go ahead and run that now, actually, as it is, with the response printing, and of course we need to add some details in here. So for that, we can come here to Stripe, and we have here actually a number that we can use. So let's try that out. If I come here to number on card, we get then also the name from here, which we don't have, but 8/2023. So 8/2023, and the CVC was 314. And I'll say Santa Claus. We see that all filled in here. The card indicator here works really beautifully. And if I click on make payment, we have then, well, it's giving me now an error. The expiry year parameter should be an integer instead. Okay, so we're going to have to make a few adjustments here to these fields still. So let's go ahead and change here, first of all, the card date. And here, first of all, we want to add a watermark in here. So let's add there the month and year. And then we also want a field mask in here. So it's #/#/ and another 2 hashes. Okay, so just like that, we add then specific validation to this field. So if I go ahead and run that, it will enforce that sort of addition there. Okay, so we have that also then displayed there as well. And then also we can add here for the card code, label or watermark, code on rear of card. Okay, and we have then also a card number, which we can leave that actually as it is. The card name, yeah, I think everything else is set. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that again. And if I come back here to the on validate success, let me double check these fields here. Card date, amount, card number, card code. Okay, there we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that again. Okay, and of course I need to add all those details in there again. $8.23. Okay, and make payment. Okay, and then we receive our Stripe charge object which back. So that is actually then all the information that we can then actually process then later. And then else we have here the redirect, which will then actually generate straight away a receipt for this payment. Okay, so then if I go ahead again, like so, and again copy those details. So that's 314 and then 08/20/23, I believe. Make payment. Okay, and then it follows through, and there we then have an invoice or receipt for that payment. Okay, so we have the date paid, amount paid, payment method, and just like that we have then payment options or payment integration using the new Scriptcase Stripe API. Okay, so that is pretty much that application ready. Now if you go ahead and if I close that, if you go ahead and check out the other API payment folder here, there is an extra folder here called project, and within this we have then also a grid Stripe, the sandbox API, the Stripe payment and invoice Stripe, and also options for Braintree. Now if I go ahead and run these, they're all going to be in Brazilian Portuguese and you may understand them. So the Stripe payment is pretty much the same as what we had just now, and in this case, as I said, there is a prepayment option. So this actually gives you then the option to pay later, and then the credit card option, which is a typical thing applied there. Okay, and if I go ahead and run here the grid, okay, it's just a basic grid, and there from this I can then basically choose the multiple options that I want to apply and then pay with Stripe. So in this case we have here a grid application, and the purchase is actually applied here on a button. Okay, so within this we have then here the lookup. So for the record, all the items first of all that we select within the list, so that's what we're grabbing hold of here, and then on finish we then run through here to the Stripe payment form, which is what we had just created. So this is pretty much enough, nothing special really. There is no direct payment within this grid application. It really is just a product list, and then with a button passing you onto Stripe or the payment application as we just created. Now here within the invoice Stripe, okay, I had started setting this up and I did get everything working and it works very nicely, but I do receive an error message because there's something regarding the product and customer relationship. So I think you actually have to have the customer already has to have purchased. So in this case, where you have here in Stripe, and if you create here, for instance, a payment link instead, because you have other payment options here for Stripe, you can then actually generate invoices via this method here. So here we have then the customer ID, which is then taken from Stripe. So of course you will have to know this, the price for the product, and then the data is then checked that, of course, that person or that a customer purchase that product, and then with that they are then provided an invoice. Okay, so this then generates that. So I just didn't get through to that final step there, setting that up for the customer. I didn't exactly understand whether it was to have an invoice ready or to have the products. I added the products, I added customers and everything, but of course I had no purchase interactions there, and I'm guessing that is where this is then giving me the error message that I'm receiving from Stripe. But otherwise, this then works very nicely, and it gives you, of course, a very good indication of how you can then also return here to Stripe and create some of your own methods for some of the other features available within the Stripe API. And there are lots. For instance, you can add products, you can update prices, you can check discounts, you can check billing, accounts, and much, much more. Okay, so do check that out. It is definitely one of the greatest APIs that I've been looking forward to for a long time, and I'm very happy it's there now. So I do hope that you, of course, enjoy it as much as I do. So as mentioned, before we finish up, let's have a very quick look again at the form. So this is then the form that we have generated today, and with that you can then add your own information. Of course, add further information here to the fields, which of course I could have added more titles in there, but I didn't. But in general, it is fully functional and ready for you to import into your own project. Now do note, of course, when you do so, or if you do so, and you want to copy any of that, then you may want to change or add everything into methods, which is something I would definitely suggest, and have your events a little cleaner. And in that case, you may want to adjust here the validation success and make further adjustments to this, as well as, of course, the data that you're sending to this form. So here on the onload, we have here the total payment, and that of course I would possibly take here on the on application init already, and then also have some extra processes there that I'm taking, such as the product and information for other data that I'm presenting to that user. But anyway, that is of course all down to you. And as I was saying, if you do want to go ahead and import this, which for sure you're going to do, come here to the application. You can change the language, and of course you can change the database of the application here within the SQL if you needed to. If you have multiple connections, for instance, then you can very quickly and easily apply that. Okay, so that is it for this week's video. I hope you enjoy it, and of course enjoy this amazing new feature with Scriptcase. And of course next year there will be, well, many more new features coming to you in Scriptcase. So thank you very much for watching this week's webinar video. I hope you have a great weekend, and of course happy Christmas and happy New Year to everyone, and best wishes all round. So thank you very much for watching again, and until next time.